Hey guys, welcome to Gluten Free Habit. I'm Linda, and today I'm going to show you how to make royal icing and how to decorate sugar cookies like a pro. Royal icing is that amazing icing that you see on bakery cookies, and it always looks so perfect. I love royal icing because it hardens to a beautiful matte finish, and because it hardens so nicely, you can stack your cookies or package them as gifts. But most of all, it's just a really fun frosting to work with. This video is part 2 of a 2-part series. In part 1, I show you how to make the gluten-free sugar cookie cutouts that you see in this video, and I'll put a link to that at the end. The full recipe can be found at GlutenFreeHabit.com. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you'll take a second to do that. And don't forget to click the bell icon and turn on notifications. And you can also follow me on Instagram at GlutenFreeHabit. And here we go with the ingredients. And as always, make sure they're gluten-free. You'll need some powdered sugar, meringue powder, water and vanilla, some gluten-free decorations, gel food coloring, some pastry bags, decorating tips, some couplers, and a scribe tool or some toothpicks. Okay, let's get started. Set out a large mixing bowl and add in your powdered sugar and meringue powder. Whisk that all together. Now add in your vanilla and a little bit of water. Now mix this up on medium speed for a few minutes. You don't want to mix on high speed because you don't want a bunch of air bubbles in your icing. We want it to be more creamy than fluffy. If the icing is too thick, feel free to add a little bit of water, but be sure to do this in tiny amounts until you reach the consistency that you're looking for. I always like to start with a good stiff consistency, and then from there I thin it out to make the different consistencies that I need. For this recipe, we'll need some medium icing for piping and thin icing for flooding. And I'll tell you what that's all about in a minute, but right now let's finish making our base of stiff consistency icing. Okay, after beating your icing for a few minutes, it should be thick and creamy. And to decide if you have stiff consistency icing, you can spoon some up and see if your icing makes a stiff peak and holds its shape. And this is how I like my base to be. And now let's add some color. Start by setting out 2 bowls, large enough that you can divide the icing equally between them. And of course, this is if you're planning to do just 2 colors like I'm doing here in the video. I'm using mint green and white. If you'll be using more than 2 colors, you'll just need to estimate how much of each color you'll need and divide your frosting accordingly. I strongly recommend a gel food coloring because it won't change the consistency of your icing. So my favorite is a Miracolor soft gel paste. As of the making of this video, it's gluten-free and the colors are really strong, so a little tiny bit goes a long way. I like to take a clean toothpick and just wipe that into the frosting, rather than turning the bottle upside down and randomly squeezing in a few drops. That way I can go little by little and get exactly the color that I'm looking for. And then of course, if you dip into the bottle again, use another fresh toothpick. And you can purchase these on my website if you just click on the shop tab, and I'll put a direct Amazon link for these food colorings along with anything else that you need to make these cookies. So stir the frosting up really well and see if you're happy with the color. Today I'm looking for a real pastel mint green, and when I think that it's about the color that I like, I just compare it to the white and make sure that there's enough of a contrast. And there is, it looks great. Now that we have the coloring done, let's work on the consistency. First, we'll make our medium consistency. We'll add a couple teaspoons of water and give it a good stir. And again with the consistency, I add the water little by little because you can always add more water, but you can't take it out. The medium consistency icing is what we'll use to outline the edge of the cookie. It needs to be soft enough that when you pipe a line, it won't crack or split, but it can't be so soft that it'll spread and run off the edge of the cookie. So medium consistency falls somewhere between stiff and flood. Oh, and before I forget, I need to put a damp paper towel over my other icing because royal icing will crust over pretty quickly. So anything that you're not working with, you'll want to cover with a moist towel. All right, let's check the consistency. It should just drip off your knife in little globs, just like it's doing here. Looks great. Okay, let's put some of this into our piping bags. And again, I'm using disposable bags because I love how easy that is, but go ahead and use whatever you prefer. And I'll also give you a really great tip that makes cleaning up super easy. The first thing you want to do is lay out some plastic wrap. Okay, spoon half of the mint green icing onto your plastic wrap. And again, depending on the type of cookies you're making and how many colors you're using, just adjust how you split your colors. So what I'm doing here is I'm dividing up my icing so that some of it will be used for piping and I'll thin out the rest to use for my flood icing. Now just grab the edges of the plastic wrap and roll it up. And keep in mind, anything you see me doing with the green icing, do the same thing with your white icing. And spin it in a circle to twist up the ends. So this will be a little self-contained package of icing that'll slip into your bag. And this just makes cleanup super easy. Just slide out the packet and throw it away. Now with the remaining icing, add a little bit more water, and this will create our flood icing. Give it a good stir. The flood consistency icing is what we use to cover the entire surface of the cookie. And it should be just thin enough that it'll flood over the surface of the cookie without rolling over the edge. And this looks a little bit too thick still, so we'll add more water. It needs to come very easily off the knife, and the best comparison I can make is that you're looking for a consistency sort of like shampoo. Okay, this looks perfect. When you drizzle your icing into your bowl, it should disappear in roughly 10 seconds. This doesn't have to be exact, of course, but this is just a good way to tell how well your icing will spread once it's on the cookie. Okay, when you're happy with the consistency for your flat icing, lay out some more plastic wrap and pour your icing onto it. If you notice any air bubbles in your icing, it's a good idea to try to get rid of those. I like to just shake them out or take a toothpick to them, because we definitely don't want air bubbles in our icing. Then go ahead and roll it up. Spin it around to close the ends and set it aside. Okay, let's get these bagged up. If you're using a disposable bag, go ahead and cut off a little bit at the end. Put in your coupler. Drop your icing packet directly into the bag. Now pull it through the end. Snip off the excess. Put on your decorator tip and your coupler. For these cookies, I'm using a number 2 tip for the piping and the flooding. Many people like to use a number 3 tip for the flooding, and you can definitely do that. And I know the number 2 tip goes a little bit slower, but I like the precision that I get when I'm trying to ice in tiny little areas. I like to put a twist tie around the end just to make sure that nothing comes out. Now just repeat these steps with your other packets of icing. Now to keep the icing from hardening and clogging your tip, take a damp paper towel, set it at the bottom of a mug, and then you can stand your frostings up and they won't dry up and they won't clog. Now lay out a paper towel and test your icings. The piping consistency frosting should be able to make a nice line that doesn't spread. Your flat icing should smooth out very quickly into a nice flat surface. Okay, I'm happy with the way these look, so I'm ready for step 1 in decorating, edging and flooding the cookies. Lay down a paper towel or a little square of parchment or wax paper and set down your cookie. This just helps keep your work surface clean. With your medium consistency icing, make a line around the outside of your cookie as close to the edge as possible. And if you make a mistake, it's no big deal. Just wipe it off and start again. You want to go ahead and flood the cookie right away because you don't want the edges to harden. If it hardens first, then you'll have an obvious border around your cookie. Maybe you want that, that's okay. But I just prefer it when the flat icing blends in a little bit with the border. You can see I'm not being super precise right now because the icing itself will blend in and fill most of those holes. When you're done, you can just take your scribe tool or your toothpick and correct any imperfections in your icing. Get rid of any air bubbles and fill in any spots that weren't completely filled in. And as you complete each cookie, just move it over to a cooling rack to dry. Okay, now that you know how to edge and flood, I'm going to show you two techniques. One is called wet on wet, the other is wet on dry. First, let's take a look at wet on wet. This technique starts by edging and flooding a cookie with thin consistency icing, and then while that base coat is still wet, you'll pipe on a decoration with your medium consistency. The point of doing this while your base coat is still wet is that when you pipe on your decoration, the second color will blend into the first and give a really pretty effect. So here I've already flooded my cookie, and I'm piping on my decoration with my medium consistency. And I'm just piping on a simple Christmas tree, and I just draw a line up the center, and a stem at the bottom. And then I just add some little candy pearls for decoration and ornaments. There's so many fun variations of what you can do with wet on wet technique. Just experiment and have fun. And the great benefit of it is that you don't have to wait for that first coat to dry. And there you go, a cute little Christmas tree cookie. And that's a simple example of wet on wet technique. And now let's take a look at wet on dry technique. So this step is not necessary, but what I do is I trace the outline of my cookie cutter, and that way I can create some designs before I try to pipe them onto the cookies. Lay down a piece of parchment, set down your cookie, and the first design I'll show you is a pretty scroll design. And when you're piping on the icing, make sure that the tip is not touching the cookie. You should be hovering a little bit above the cookie. So to do the wet on dry technique, you should edge and flood all the cookies that you want to use and leave them at room temperature to firm up. The amount of time will vary somewhat just depending on how thick your frosting is and how humid it is in your kitchen, but count on at least a few hours. Just make sure they're firm enough before you start piping on your second color. You don't want to damage any cookies. Now because royal icing forms a crust so quickly, make sure that you add your sprinkles and sparkly sugar before this happens to make sure that your decorations stick. And here's one of the reasons why I like to decorate on a square of parchment or paper towel, because then there's no waste with excess sprinkles or decorations. Anything that falls off the cookie, I can just pour right back into the bowl. Then I'll add a few more of these pretty sugar pearls. And there we go, we're all done with our scroll cookie. Okay, our next cookie will be more of a traditional snowflake design. Start by piping straight lines from corner to corner. And then at the tip of those, just add some tiny diagonal lines. Make sure to occasionally stop and wipe off your piping tip. Now draw some shorter lines out from the center, and tiny little diagonal lines there too. And then add some little sugar pearls. Okay, and there's our pretty snowflake cookie. All right, the final cookie that we're going to do is a combination of a snowflake with some scrolls. Start by crossing 3 lines in the middle. And then pipe a line between each of those. And then sprinkle on some sparkly sugar before it hardens up. And then pipe a scroll at each snowflake tip. And remember, if you mess up on your piping, you can always just gently wipe it off and start again. And then I'm doing a little dot in between each of the scrolls. Add more sparkle sugar. And tap off any excess. And then I'll finish it up with some sugar pearls. Royal icing firms up so nicely to the point where you can stack them and package them as gifts. But this will take a little time. For these cookies to fully firm up, just let them sit at room temperature for about 7 to 8 hours. And of course, before you package them or stack them, test a cookie and make sure they're firm enough. And there we go. Here's the final Christmas cookie. I think it looks really pretty. And here are a few more cookies that I've done to give you some more design ideas. And if you have someone in your life that's gluten-free, these make really nice gifts. These treat bags are perfect. They fit a single cookie very nicely, and it makes a pretty and delicious treat to hand out to friends and family or to put in a stocking. Just tie it up and curl the ribbon. And there you go, gluten-free sugar cookie cutouts with royal icing. If you found this video helpful, do me a favor and click the thumbs up down below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you'll take a second to do that so that you don't miss any of the new recipes. And be sure to click the bell icon and turn on notifications. And you guys know I love hearing from you, so please leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Enjoy your cookies. I'll see you next time on Gluten Free Habit.